Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. And on this show, we greet you from all around the world, or the United States of America. I greet you live from Morrisville, North Carolina, the All America city right here in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. And on this sometimes turbulent show where we talk about the divisiveness of U.S. politics, world politics, a global recession, a post-COVID world, and what we're dealing with the flu and COVID and other things that are still affecting our healthcare and what the future of the world will look like. Today, I want to begin just with some initial insights, and we're going to bring in a special guest. But last night, well, first of all, before I begin my monologue, I'm wearing my purple today because it is Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month. And 62,000 people a year are diagnosed with this relatively incurable cancer. About 49,000 will die. And it's a really, really awful disease. So I would encourage everyone to go to pancreaticcancer.org, where you can learn about the resources and the things that we can do to bring a light to this terrible disease, raise awareness of early screenings, which can increase the survival rate, and pray for any families who have lost a loved one from pancreatic cancer. November 17th is Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day, and we will bring in a guest to talk about pancreatic cancer on that day. President Biden warned the country last night in an unprecedented televised address to the nation that American democracy is under attack. Many Republican candidates have said they refuse to accept Tuesday's midterm election results, which could set the U.S. on a path to chaos, Biden said. And there have been the FBI and others issuing the fact that there could be violence out after these elections, regardless of how the outcomes go. We hope that's not the case. But the speech came less than a week after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked, and the FBI expects, as I said, more threats of violence. So we're going to talk about that today and the upcoming midterm elections. On Monday, we're hoping to have Senator Wiley Nichols, state senator from North Carolina, who's running in one of the most contentious congressional races, the Congressional District 13 in North Carolina, facing up against Trump-backed Bo Hines. It's a statistical dead heat. Literally only 100 few votes could make the election go either way. We're going to bring the senator on to talk about that. And finally, in international news, we're going to talk about the war in Ukraine, but a devastating war in Ethiopia might be coming to an end. The Ethiopian government and rebel forces from the northern Tigray region. The war began 2 years ago and has left tens of thousands of people dead. The two sides formally announced a truce yesterday, raising hopes that peace could soon return to Africa's second most populous country. And finally, the Parkland shooter was sentenced formally to prison and life yesterday. A jury last month decided not to give Nicholas Cruz the death penalty. He killed 17 people at a Florida high school 4 years ago when he was 19 years old. So let's get started. We're going to talk about those issues today. Mark, go ahead and bring in our guest and introduce her if you could.
1 second. See if I can come on first. Yes, I can definitely do that. And all along those lines, definitely glad to bring in our guest of honor and all in that space. She's got an amazing story and definitely had the pleasure of having her on the dinner party yesterday. I told her about our news show as well. But Elizabeth Power has had the pleasure of both being a shoe repair woman as well as having worked with a number of stars, including Tammy Wynette, Alabama, and a host of others as well. And of course, she's got some great Southern humor and has actually got some connections to UNC because her dad was actually involved in the J school there, the journalism school, and all in that space. And now she's doing a lot of work with her trauma institution and all in that kind of way. So definitely glad to have you here on the news show, Miss Power. I know that Lee Newton Rhodes oftentimes talks about civility and the need for civility in our world, and he is a former political person and all along those lines. I'll be bringing him on in a minute and all in that kind of way, and I'm sure he might have some thoughts about it. And of course, you met Chris Greco, our military analyst and an amazing data guy. And of course, Steve Rao is the host of this particular show. And of course, I produce it and co-host with him and all along those lines. But if you'll just share a little bit about your journey, some of those things that you learned from those celebrities, because like I said, as we were talking yesterday, I was going like, wow, she's got some amazing stories. And then you and Chris earlier off stage were talking about some of those Southern phrases, and I was going like, I hadn't heard that one before, so I'd love to hear about some of these amazing Southern phrases that are out there that you have learned and that you added to your humor, because I think humor is one of the main things to go with solving trauma and all in that space. But definitely share a little bit about your story, and of course, we'll bring in some of the other folks as well.
Thanks, Mark. I have one of the most unlikeliest histories. Most unlikeliest is really grammatically correct, I think. But I started out as a shoe repairer in Nashville, as you know, and worked in the back of a little tiny shop that was in business, out of business, in business, out of business. Guy had a little trouble paying taxes. And there I got to work on the shoes of just so many interesting people who would never recognize me, who wouldn't know who I do, who I am, or what I've done. But I was the custom patcher. So if your boots needed to be tailored, I would take up the calf. Yeah, they do, Chris. He was just a little more dedicated to not paying than most people. But Tammy, when I was at the Dolly Parton's place back in Opryland, not at Opryland, but at Dollywood, I saw in her museum boots that I had repaired, and it was an amazing feeling. I had actually made a button hook shoe to go on display at the Cumberland Museum, so children could practice using a button hook, which is one of the ways of connecting them to their past. And out of that, I ended up, and it's been an interesting journey, getting master's degree at Vanderbilt in education. I now teach psychiatry part-time as an adjunct instructor at Georgetown in trauma-informed medical care. And I now help people around the world learn to think about the ways that we respond to very difficult experiences in different ways. Help people become trauma-informed and go a step further and live it out, which is becoming trauma responsive. It's exciting work.
And along those same kind of ways, and I know Steve probably had some questions for you as well, and of course we'll bring in some of those other amazing guests. You have actually done some international work in that trauma space. We didn't really get into it in the dinner party, but I know that you mentioned that some of your work has been in the African nation of Zambia, and you've done some work in some other places as well. So could you talk a little bit about that work and the work that you're doing in the international lanes in terms of helping them with some trauma? We just heard earlier about Chris mentioned what was going on in Ethiopia and Eritrea. And my dad, who is actually a UNC professor, had the pleasure of several years teaching in that area, particularly in Eritrea. So I do know that it can be very traumatic if you're in a war-torn country. So that was some of the work you were doing in Zambia, and I would love to hear about that.
Yes, I have been honored to be able to serve others in Zambia, in South Africa, in Japan, in Juarez, Mexico, in Moncton, Canada, and New Brunswick. I basically go where people ask me to come that I think I'll probably live to tell the story of afterwards. What I find in countries like Africa, where there is structural poverty, as well as structural oppression and violent conflict. I worked with the schools as private school in Zambia, helping them become trauma responsive. The marks that their children made on their exams went up substantially the last term, not because I'm a miracle worker or anything, but because these folks made changes. For example, instead of thinking they had bad children, they came to think of them as children whose behavior told them there was a problem they were trying to solve. The children who sleep in class don't get to sleep at home because they work to take care of their families. They're all orphaned. So they have the double dipping on their energy of school and of work. The children came to school and they sat in extremely European, education is European. It's look at the back of somebody else's head. Do what I do when I tell you to do it. But if you think about the African ancestors, they learned sitting in circles, and they learned by doing. They learned looking at each other. They learned in relationship. And so the very first thing I do with educators and with a lot of clinicians is I talk about the difference between the generic European values of people who look like me and the values of people the generic values of Afrocentric and indigenous nations. And then I asked them to think about which of these sets of values would you call healthier based on what you teach or know as a professional. So we end up seeing that if you want to help people feed themselves and grow and mature to become who they are capable of becoming, you may want to shift to an Afrocentric or indigenous value system. Yet all of our theory and treatment is written from a European perspective, except maybe 2 people.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely, Steve, do you have some questions based on what was said? And I definitely want to bring in Lee Newton Rhodes, and actually the other computer is working, so I'm going to actually switch that one. So if y'all see me go off, that is what has happened and all in that space. But I want to bring in Lee Newton Rhodes and Chris Greco before doing that and all in that space. But definitely an amazing conversation. And I'm sure Chris and Lee may have some thoughts. Because like I said, I oftentimes think of Lee as being one that is trying to get us to be more polite, to have a little bit more civility in the life, even when I see some of his posts on LinkedIn and some of the other things that I have been following along in that space. But definitely, I think that he's like one of the masters of civility. Even sometimes if we disagree, we can agree that we can have a smile on our face, like Lee is having right now, and all in that space. And I know that you are one that has even talked about the importance of humor in dealing with these traumas as well. Like I said, you and Chris earlier were having some interesting conversations. We were actually joking about a news story that I'm going to bring up right now and everything. And that is the person that was in one of the Asian countries that apparently was the victim of an assassination attempt. But the only thing that they hit was his foot, and all in that kind of space. So I'm going like, don't know about that aim that they were getting and all in along those lines. But any questions that y'all have for Elizabeth? And like I said, I'm going to switch to the main computer all in that way.
So Elizabeth, I we had a talk before the show, but
Yeah.
I was just thinking about humor aspects and how humor is part of that. And unfortunately, your kids always, and Lee's got like 90 kids. So I'm sorry, I'm exaggerating. He really has 70. He really has 77. But
Chris, you're rounding down.
right, sorry, but basically what your kids will always keep you humble. So there I am. I was a week or 2 out of surgery, and I was sleeping a lot. Sleeping and whatever. Because of the heart surgery, the bypass. So I had surgical steel that was holding my sternum together, basically. And I told my kids that and whatever else. So one time I was sleeping, and all of a sudden I wake up to this laughing, and my 2 daughters at that point, they were both in high school, and they were just laughing and laughing. I couldn't figure out why they were laughing. My wife was laughing, and I thought, what are you guys laughing at? I was in a half stupor. I get up and I look down, and they had put, refrigerator magnets all along my chest. And and I got up. I said, "Really, guys? Really? This is where we've gone to at this point." And my youngest daughter, who's now a major in the Air Force, I mean, she just laughed, and I thought, one day your kids will show you exactly what you're made of. And this is trust me, I will repay you. It may take 10 years, 20 years, but I'm going to get you. But at that point, I think it was just the humor aspect. I tell that story, and people just, they get the biggest kick out of that. And to this day, I can take a beryllium magnet and put it on my bare chest, and it will stick. And I tell my grandson, I'm the man of steel, and he doesn't believe me. And I put that magnet up, and he goes, "Oh, you are Superman." I said, yes, I am. Shh, keep it quiet. But I mean, the bottom line is that trauma can lead to good humor, and it can do those types of things that people do that. And so I'm really happy that you're into that, and an amazing story of how you got there. I mean, I'd like to have you on my show. I have a show, Lead with Love, that is also part of the network. So I'd like to get in contact with you and have you on that show. It's a pretty uplifting show.
Along those same lines, and you can speak out of this, Chris. I remember that a cousin of mine, her husband was actually, we were hanging out. I think that they were very much involved in the Native American culture. So he is definitely a don't think he's full-blooded Apache, but he's definitely got some Apache blood and wins a lot of times in the contest. So he's a very big and muscular man. And I remember that when my nephews were younger, them and some of the other folks were having one of those moments that you were having. They were sitting there and he was having a rest after I think he had done a competition and everything. And of course they had literally put, I believe, makeup on him and all of that. So it was quite embarrassing because he said there going like, wait a minute, why do I have red lipstick and whatever else they had put on him and all in that space. So yeah, I think sometimes the adults get abused by the kids when they get an opportunity. But maybe
I'd like
to have some thoughts about that.
I'd like to show the share screen and
Yes,
show where Zambia is. I think it's important that people understand geographically where everything is. This is Africa, and Zambia, as you can see, the Democratic Republic of Congo. We just went over a massive issue there with Rwanda, so they're having a problem there. Zambia is right next to Tanzania, Tanzania, however you want to call it. Wherever, by the way, Steve, Rishi Sunak's I can't remember. I think his mother was born in Tanzania or Kenya, one of those two. But his what was it, Tanzania or Kenya? Tanzania. So basically, I mean, so the Brits have a very close tie really to Tanzania. And then Kenya, all this area is called the Horn of Africa up in here, really, really bad situation. But Zambia here is, and I'll do a world view on that, but that's where it's located. So I think people need to understand, I mean, it's very close to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Mozambique. I think people just don't understand the whole idea of where that geography lies and what it does. So I think that's pretty important to bring that up. So I just thought I'd share that just to make sure that people understand where exactly Elizabeth has been. So
I appreciate that.
We had a question for Elizabeth.
Yeah, Elizabeth, thank you. First of all, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming. And about trauma, I can speak about my own personal trauma as a child and as an adult. But one thing I've noticed in terms of trauma, the best comedians, unfortunately, have come from the horriblest lives due to no fault of their own. You're shaking your head. Can you comment on that?
Yes, that's the easiest thing I can say. It's interesting because there are two. I always love to help people make the shift from being a professional victim. Oh my God, you can't blame me. Oh my God, it's not my fault. Oh, look how they've done me in. Look, and
it's all true.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's all true.
Yeah. Or the people who say, you might have got me down, but you ain't got me out. And who develop post-traumatic growth that leads them to expand their horizons, their emotional intelligence, their abilities in life, the things they need to get by, including a good sense of humor. For example, a friend of mine who has multiple personality disorders, it used to be called, said that her accountant came to her the first year and said, I don't know how many of you have to sign your tax return, but here. And he'd added a whole page of signatures to it, signature lines for her. And her attorney said, you're the only person I know who could sue yourself for inside trading. And these kinds of things, when people tell them on themselves, and when they make the jokes that don't put anybody else down, the post-traumatic growth says, I can get over anything except being dead. Let's go. Come on, let's get at it. And that's what I love to help people switch to.
Amazing attitude.
Hey, Ms. Powell, along those same lines, and coming back to something that definitely Steve was talking about earlier, we're seeing a lot of folks that are wondering, no matter what their political affiliation is, whether we're going to see a lot more trauma during this after the election based on the results of the election, and also what a lot of people are calling toxic politics. I know that's definitely what Obama was saying when he was in Phoenix, and he was definitely yelling at everybody, So he was saying everybody's yelling and all along those lines. But I'm just wondering, is that something that you are finding as well, that people maybe need to find a sense of humor in this politics? Because I've been actually jokingly saying that I want to have all the politicians sing "We Are the World." I think that would solve a lot of the problems.
I think that would be great. Or maybe do the YMCA song. That might be fun. The cowboy went to school in Winston-Salem at the North Carolina School of the Arts. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Now, Randy Jones, we were in school there together. I think that there are a couple of things to say about the current state of politics. One is that I can't see this much highly polarized, on-off, black and white. There's no gray shades of gray. I mean, it's like people forgot there's a dimmer switch. The glass is not half empty or half full. It's the dadgum thing's refillable. And we need multiple parties, because if we have any one party running anything, we are at risk. But as long as we have the ability of social media and the people who use it to whip things into a frenzy of fake, misguided news that is nothing but my personal opinion. I think some of it comes back to my truth versus the truth.
Mhm.
My truth is my opinion. The truth is based on facts and numbers and data. I doubt, Chris, that you got to do much work that was based on your truth, right?
What do you mean? You mean when I was
As an intel analyst and a data
no, I
analyst?
mean we had three. I always tell these guys here we have three things. If you hear it once, it's a rumor. You hear it twice. It's part fact, part rumor. The third time that you hear it, and there's evidence coming there,
Right.
then at that point it's substantiated. But you got to go 3 times, and you have to make sure that all that stuff continues to build in factual aspects.
But what
And
do we
that's,
do what do we do now when it's building in aspects that are based on false information? Let's just call them lies.
Yeah, yeah, right. Misrepresentation, mistruths. Yeah, I've heard it all. The
Yeah.
politicians. Sorry, Steve. The politicians do it very well. I misheard. I disremembered. I misremembered. Yeah, right. Okay. So the bottom line is this: is that the more that people lie, who was it? I think it was the Nazi propaganda specialist, right? The more you tell them that it's the truth, the more that they believe it's the truth. So it's that type of thing. So
Chris?
the more that you inundate that, right?
Joseph Goebbels.
Joseph
Yes,
Goebbels,
Joseph
thank you.
Goebbels.
So I mean that's what and unfortunately the media is just building this and building it, and they love it. What the media, this is just me talking my opinion, what the media would love is to have us in a civil war and then cover that and get their Pulitzer prizes that way. I mean that's very cynical, and I get that, but I mean they would just
they would love it. It'd be a feeding frenzy.
Yeah, the feeding frenzy.
It's just I think the social media has just made it so tough, and it's hard to really understand what's the right news, what's the fake news, and then I think just the vitriol of just not wanting to even talk to each other. I've noticed the polls are so unfriendly now, very intense. People are just coming in and screaming at each other, yelling, reporting incidents, claiming that they're not going to accept the outcome of elections. I mean, I think we need to get to a point where we can have disagreements, but find the common ground where we can move things forward, and rather than make it a situation where it's one way or the other way, like Elizabeth was saying. So
no, and Elizabeth, along the same lines, there's another thing that is out there in the news, whether it's here in North Carolina, whether it's in California, where it's apparently risen by some ridiculous amount and everything. But I was just wondering, in your trauma work, how have you been dealing with the homeless population? Because one of the stories that I saw that I was ready to bring up and everything is that apparently it's risen 70% in California's capital. So that's definitely an issue there. You got 70% rise in there, but definitely even around the corner. I live around the corner from Duke and the VA, and there are homeless people here as well, which is shocking in the United States. And we would have these kind of folks out there. And I actually have seen people living underneath bridges, even here in Durham, North Carolina. I've seen people that are living in encampments, because I do get around by mass transit. So some of these people have told me that, I'm going off to live in the woods somewhere in like a little encampment area, and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, how much has that played into the trauma work that you've been doing?
I'm taking a deep breath. The question of why are people homeless goes right back to things that overwhelm them to the point that they think they're going to lose their minds or be badly injured or die. That's what trauma is. It doesn't matter if it's cardiac surgery, losing a job, becoming homeless, going through a natural disaster, being shot in the foot. It doesn't matter what the name of the event is. If it makes the person who's experiencing it think they might die or lose their mind or be badly injured, it's traumatic. Period. End of discussion. Very subjective. With regard to people who are homeless, there are immediate responses that I have about working with them. And the first is that I beat the drum loudly that it's not addiction and abuse and mental illness that causes homelessness. It's domestic violence, not being able to be paid a living wage, not having the social and emotional skills or the emotional intelligence to tolerate the normal discomforts of the world. That same inability, if you don't have the skills in social emotional learning or emotional intelligence, social awareness, self-awareness, self-regulation, that's a big one, the ability to have a volume dial on your emotions, which means you have to know you have them, first of all, and you have to somehow think they're important enough to manage. If you don't have that volume, that self-regulation, your social awareness and your social skills are going to be a whole lot lower. There goes your ability to work in an environment where you have to serve other people.
Yep.
And your empathy and decision making are going to be really poor. And if those things are in a deficit, those are just the skills required of emotional intelligence that we hope children develop in early childhood. If you don't have that stuff in order and the stuff hits the fan, then suddenly it's a whole lot harder to keep a roof over your head. And it's a whole lot easier when you don't have a roof over your head to do what people do for comfort when they're in serious privation, drink and drug. Yep. So we have two things. One is fixing the structural issues of economy and costs of housing. And the other is those skills that people need to be more effective as human beings, no matter what their political persuasions are. Right now, we are just about 10 yards from beating each other in the street to death like Neanderthals.
No doubt about that. Hey, Steve, just really quickly, I did want to bring in Eunice as well. Eunice has done a lot of amazing work. I actually met him on Clubhouse. He's had a very traumatic life. He's definitely lost his own kids to violence and all of that kind of ways in other parts of the world. But I want Eunice to share his story in the way that he is trying to use what he's gone through to help others. So I met him on Clubhouse, told him that I would love to have him come in and share his journey and his story. So Eunice, if you can just share a little bit about what you've got going on, I would love to hear what you're talking about, because you are definitely trying to use the pain that you went through to make this a better world. So if you can just share a little bit about what you went through and what you're doing and all along those lines. I was very moved when I heard your story on Clubhouse, and that's why I invited you to come here on this space and everything.
Well, I appreciate you, Mark. Thank you so much for this opportunity. First of all, let me acknowledge everyone on the platform. My name is Eunice Camara. I'm based in the UK. I grew up in America, and being an entrepreneur was something of my focus. But about 2 years ago, as a motivational speaker, I was about to get on stage to tell the world how beautiful it is, when my manager came to me and asked me to pick up a phone call. And as a norm, I refused, because I need to motivate myself to go on stage. And he asked me to pick this call up. The expression on his face, I do apologize. The expression on his face indicated to me that it was something of abnormal. So when I picked up, the voice I heard was my mother's voice saying, "He's dead." My question was, who's dead? Your son. My son had a party for his girlfriend a week before his birthday party. And when I received the call as a parent, I was disarrayed, angry, livid. So I wanted to hurt everything moving, but why should I go and hurt another child and put that pain upon another parent? So being in the UK, I am affiliated, associated with the mayors and so forth, and televisions and radios. We need to do something for our youths. So that's why I created Camara Youth. It's an organization where we support our children from going in and out of jail and killing each other. So Camara Youth is an organization where we support our youths to think out the box, not just out the box, be out the box, and become entrepreneurs. And we support them in becoming nurturers, individuals of essence, So I work with a lot of psychologists, a lot of entrepreneurs. We just want to make a change because I strongly believe that I was one of them youths. I was lost, I was confused, I was vulnerable, I was trying to find my place in society. So engaging with Mark was just a phenomenal thing because his mindset is just something that I need to dig into a little bit more so I can bring into my enterprise and see how we can grow. So without holding more time, I just want to say it's a sincere pleasure to be here.
Well,
Chris,
we
I see
really
that you
love-
brought up his
we're so
website,
sorry
and
for
I
your
appreciate
loss.
that.
We're so sorry for your loss, and thank you for sharing this story with us.
So this is Eunice's website, the Kamara Youths. So I mean, wow. I mean, that picture, that picture certainly strikes me, touches me really to the heart. No doubt about that. So this is basically what you have. Nice. Everything's up front, bud. Nice job.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
youth testimonials is very
But
nice.
Eunice, what I will tell you is that I had the honor of I think it's so amazing what you've done amidst this tragedy that you faced. And when I was at the White House last week, I did get a chance to just briefly talk to the president, and I asked him. I knew both his kids, one of them who died, and I knew who they were, and I just said, how did you get? Because I have a friend who just lost a child, and he just said that you have to have purpose to get up, to get through the darkness, and that a lot of times we were celebrating Diwali. He said that he had to find the light in others to be able to even get up in the morning. So I know that we don't see that side of our president of the United States, but he's certainly a man who has been knocked down considerably and been able to get up. And I know that he would be very proud of the work that you're doing to share how we can prevent future tragedies and things like that. And so we really appreciate you sharing this story with us, and whatever we can do to help and support and bring more awareness of it, we would love to.
Definitely. How did you get through that, Vanessa, and everything? Because like I said, I can only imagine. I don't have any kids of my own, but I do have two nephews, and if I was to get that call, I know I would be utterly devastated and don't know how I would react. But you were actually getting this news while you were motivating others. Did you actually get through that speech, and how did you even get through the pain of what you went through and all along those lines?
Mark, to be quite honest, I don't know how literally I walked out of that venue, because when I received that call, I walked out of there with their mic on me, still behind my back, and literally I ended up in a hotel, depending on alcohol, trying to avoid the world and just sink into my little own domain. But I received a call from the mother of my son, and which she told me, asked me a series of questions. Is this what he would want? Is this what he would want? Is this the image that you have of him? And within those lines, I came to the understanding of he was someone that would support someone. Alpha is a type, if he sees you unhappy, he will sit with you and try to make jokes or try to cheer you up. He's a type, during his funeral, which I was not able to attend, I had videos, there's thousands of people that attended this event. And because of him, we started building water pumps in different parts of the world. I became a global youth advocate. I support youth organizations globally, and Camaro Youths, we give so much money. We have no money coming in. So everything that I'm doing financially is for me. And I'm not seeking money from any organization, anyone. The only thing I've ever asked of anyone is for their presence, because these youths need us to show them that we're here to support them. Not to say, here is 100,000, here is $5 or whatever have you, but our presence makes a difference, building that rapport. So when I'm up, sometimes I'm up all night, my wife gets tired of me. When are you going to sleep? But it becomes such a passion when I see a youth, with a smile, happy to go to school. We work with an organization in India where we have encouraged these youth to go to school, 500 youths, buying their books and their uniform. There's an organization in Africa, in Kenya, called Young Stars, where we support them every month. We buy bags of rice, we send to them. There's another organization in Uganda where these kids are literally sleeping on the floor. I send mattresses to these youths. And here in the UK, I deal with the mayor of Brent, different parts of London, where we bring these youths into our services. I take them to the TV station, so we elevate them to become what they were sincerely meant to be. So that's my passion. That gives me joy. That takes my mind away from my son, because all these kids, I look at them as my own.
Both of y'all, what do you think is the reason that so many of our youth are painted in such a negative light? And I'd love to hear from both Elizabeth and my other guest, Yanissa, because I have actually of the opinion that some of our youth are doing some amazing work. We may not agree with their political things that they are part of, because I am actually a fan of Greta and some of the work that she's doing in climate change. And of course, there are youth that have been part of the Black Lives Matter movement and some other movements that are out there. But I was just wondering, sometimes when we hear about the youth, it is in a negative light. It's kind of in the gang light. It's kind of in the social media light. It's in some of the other lights. I actually personally think that this generation, well, one, they've gone through so much, because if you were born in 2001, you started off with 9/11, and now you're in the middle of a pandemic and everything. So if you're born in that kind of lifestyle, I just think that they've gone through a lot. And like I said, my nephews definitely fall in that category and in that age range. But what is y'all's view of the youth, and what is y'all's thoughts around youth leadership and in that space? I just wanted to hear from you, particularly Yanissa, as you've done a lot of work in there. But Elizabeth, I'm imagining that the trauma work has also been dealing with the youth as well. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about that.
Yanissa, why don't you talk? There you go.
Well, I was going to say ladies first. I'm old fashioned, I'm an old man. Don't pay this no mind. I shave a lot.
And I'm an old woman. Thank you. You are a kind man. May God and the ancestors bless you greatly. I think that we give the youth a bad rap, and I think sometimes youth deserve a bad rap. I see youth who are doing such amazing things. I'm totally blown away by their innovativeness, their willingness to engage, the fact that they hadn't found the box or the cardboard to make it with to get into it, and the fact that they believe so passionately about a future that as my life moves closer to its end, I feel myself less motivated by it. But I will say this much about these youth that's so important. By 2025, 75% of the workforce will be Gen Z and Gen X people. Those two particular groups, in all the surveys I've read, want more than anything coaching and relationship with mentors. And I come back to my central thesis that relationship is the most crucial thing we have. And we are not particularly good right now at developing deep and meaningful relationships because we are device addicted.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
We need to be spending our time with these youth who have experienced so much overwhelming mass trauma, as well as probably their own individual traumatic experiences, which for one child whose parents I worked with was a child wearing $300 jeans to a school where nobody else could afford those. And he was getting bullied because he had on expensive jeans. Now, to me, at the personal level, that seems really frivolous. But to him, it was becoming life-threatening.
Yeah.
I think that the inability to deal with the discomforts of normal daily living is transmitted generationally. My mother didn't know it. Her mother didn't know it. Somewhere along the way, we lost some of the toughness that can be healthy. I'm not talking about meanness. I'm talking about the ability to tolerate the normal discomforts of everyday life without yanking out a gun or cutting somebody or shooting somebody. You know, and I have learned that the best question I can ask is, I wonder how this behavior helps that person. When I see a child who's going off like a bottle rocket and mad as a wet hen, I wonder, how is this helping them? Do they need a sense of power right this minute? How can I let them have some of that? Do they need to have some control? Does this help them preserve a sense of choice? Is it the only way they can express their feelings? And there are two things that are happening. One is, when I'm asking these questions, I'm looking real wise because I'm being quiet. I'm asking the questions up here. And the other thing is I'm honoring that child or that adult with my presence. I'm not backing up and I'm not attacking. I think our youth need us to show up, suit up, say, hello, how are you? What can I do for you? Hey, what would you like to learn? And let me help you learn that. And I agree that in person is so much better. When the pandemic hit and we began to move to Zoom and people were just given such a hard time about it, I said, wait a minute. Your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren may well live off planet. This will be how we will communicate. We got to figure this out.
Yeah, no doubt.
I agree with you. It's really terrible. I mean, it's just so sad that our children are watching the way we're behaving, and we're not able to take a step back and really say, you know, what example are we setting for this generation? You know, and I think that's what's concerning. And hopefully the only way that it will actually ever get better is if that generation decides they're going to handle themselves differently and that they're going to sit down and talk to each other. But I don't know whether that would ever happen, because on both sides, you're seeing youths being trained to think this way or that way, rather than independently of, taking the, ideas from people that you don't agree with. And so that, I think, to me, Elizabeth, is something that's very concerning. And hopefully
along those same lines, I did want to hear from Eunice as well, because I just want to give him some time to respond to the youth conversation also. So Eunice, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, sitting here listening to what Elizabeth and this gentleman, Steve, have just stated, mirror neurons, psychologically speaking, even as an adult, will replicate what we see. If Mark is smiling, Steve is smiling, Elizabeth, everyone on the platform, I will smile as well. If our youth are seeing something at home, toxic behaviors, they will take that out. And especially during the COVID, a lot of them saying so much. And remember, their minds is not the way many of us think. So they face there's a lot of gender issues. There's just so much with them right now, trust issues. So when we judge them, we're not actually giving them the chance to understand the root of their behaviors, the root of the issue. But by us sitting down and having that conversation, or just acknowledging them on the street, that makes a difference to them. There was a gentleman, a young man, he came into the center that I run with a machete this big. And one thing I have an agreement with the police is that you don't drag anyone out of my center. You don't arrest anyone. If there's an issue, bring it to us and we will try to resolve it. We have them there as undercovers just to support the team. So there was a young man that came with a machete this big, and it was in his pants, and apparently this officer had observed him, and he came to me because I just don't get up in the morning and go to my office. I make sure I spend time with my youths. I make sure that I'm there, that they see me, that we have that conversation. So when he came to me and said, that gentleman has a weapon, My first question is, how do you know he has a weapon? But when I call the gentleman into my office, because we never have a 1-to-1, it's always a 2-to-1. So I engage in a conversation, come to find out a friend of his was just killed a week and a half ago, and he has no psychological support. He's in fear of his own life. A lot of them see a lot of these murders, their friends being killed, and who's there to support them? Who do they turn to talk to? Society is so busy. I have to put myself in it because I am part of society. We are so busy saying, oh, that's a bad child, or he's this and that, or she's a thief. Let's understand, why is that person stealing that food? Why is that person carrying that weapon? What is going on with them? Why are they acting out in school? So during COVID, we had the opportunity because I have receipts. These kids did not just become my kids. Their family became part of my family. My team, we used to drive around, call them on the phone and say, we are dropping the food in front of your house because these kids, some of them were selling drugs to support their mother who is disabled or whatever have you. So we would drive to the house, call them outside, even if it's an apartment building in the project, we will put the food by the door, walk away, and then call them and say, the food is in front of your door. We're not just going to leave. We want to make sure that it's received. So understanding them, especially during COVID, being locked up or being born in this era, is so much going with them psychologically that they don't have the support that they need.
No, that makes a lot of
that's
sense.
exactly
Everything.
right. We're going to close out with just some talk about the president's discussion about democracy, because we didn't talk about that today, being threatened. But we have Sasha Starr. Sasha, do you have any update on Ukraine for us?
Yes, I will discuss it in my program at 11 o'clock. In fact, the situation in Ukraine escalating the world tensions. United States sent its two carriers, one in England, which is now being directly threatened by Russia, and another one in Gibraltar, and that would essentially be able to deal with the Russian invaders in Ukraine. So the tensions are escalating substantially, and we are getting closer and closer to some kind of resolution of all that, but it cannot go on like that for a long time. So there has to be some kind of resolution. Hopefully it will be a peaceful one, but the other type of resolutions, and you know what I mean, you cannot exclude entirely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the whole thing about democracy, and I know that a lot of times within the democracy conversation around the world have been conversations around nationalism and the things along those lines. So I guess I'll direct this to Yanissa because he is in the UK. But how much of this rise in nationalism are you seeing? Because you are a UK citizen, but I think that you're originally from one of the African nations, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines. But how much are we seeing that rise, and does some of these kind of nationalism issues exist in the UK? I've never been to the UK, but I have heard that there are even some racial divides. And yes, I did say the right word, Chris, even in countries like London and all along those kind of spaces. But I just wondered if you could share a little bit of your own personal experience as one that has been in the UK. And I'm not sure if you were born there or if you migrated there. Yanissa?
He's on mute.
Hey guys, real quickly, I have to interject before you answer that question. I do need some help with something. I'm hosting a virtual event with President Clinton today for a United States congressman, someone who's running for the Congress. And before we leave the show, I'd love for someone to just give me an idea of a question to ask him. We're submitting questions, and can anyone give me an idea of what we can ask our former president? Because this is a great chance. Something about what's going on in the world. I just needed an idea before 11 o'clock because I had to submit the questions. So just any ideas from my team. I figured we could make this a work session too and get an idea, because I got so many things I want to ask, and this is a former president, And I think we should ask him about his observations, right? So anyway, just want to throw that out there.
Steve, I just one quick suggestion, if you don't mind. We spoke about this a little earlier. Civility. It starts at the top. It's modeled at the top. It's shown at the top. It's started at the top. Why can't our leaders be more civil in the way they even speak about people who they disagree with on whatever level? And I think our youth look up to them and learn from them and take a message from them.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great thing to ask.
That's a good question. Like I've mentioned a couple of times, I've mentioned it on this show earlier. I would love to know why we have the how a nation this great, and I definitely think that the nation is great, can have the homeless problem and some of the other problems that we have. So I would love to know something about how he is dealing with that and all along those lines. Eunice, I was asking you earlier about the whole nature of nationalism and a little bit about your own background, because I think that you originally migrated from one of the African nations, but I was just asking you to share a little bit about that earlier.
Right. Yeah, not to deviate from your question, Mark. I have a gentleman, I know many of you like coffee, and he is from Boston. He owned Boston Brewers, the coffee company. And this gentleman was making so much money, and he decided to shut down so many of his coffee shops just to support a lot of the homeless individual people in Boston. So I will be more than happy to introduce you to him as well, because for someone who's making millions and one day just wake up to the realization that, wait, I have a roof over my head, I have heat, I have water, you know, I have so much money. What do I really need all this money for when there are people dying during the winter time? You know, I need to just shut a couple of he did put a lot of businesses out of work, don't get me wrong, but it's a thought process of helping people that I totally support. So I'll be more than happy to introduce you to him as well, Mark, and anyone that needs his information, because now he is doing so much outsource, and he's just a phenomenal human being. I love engaging with him. Whenever he and I get on the phone, I just feel like I'm talking to someone of norm. He don't come across as, well, I'm a millionaire, he can't say this to me. He lets you have that conversation. But I was born in Africa, you know, many millions of moons ago. And I was raised in New York. I've been in America for over 30 years. When I transitioned to the UK, about 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, actually, is due to the fact that a female had, you know, I was having a baby, which I wasn't aware of. She did not tell me until she was about 6.5 months pregnant. I asked her to transition to the US. She refused. So I don't want to be a father from a distance, you know. I just feel as a parent, we need to be there. So, and my son was a big boy now. He's in his 20s, you know. So I said, okay, let me go be a father to this child. So I transitioned to the UK, and yeah, so it's just been phenomenal. I hope that answered your question. I don't believe in the color race. I don't believe in, oh, you're from Zimbabwe or wherever. I believe that we're all human beings. I believe that we all feel pain. If Mark, you cut me right now, hopefully I hope I bleed red. And if I go and cut Elizabeth, I hope she bleeds red. And we feel pain. So we're all human beings. So the mere fact of, oh, you're green or purple, what is that? Why are we judging each other by the color of our skin? At the end of the day, if I lose someone that I love, I feel pain, and vice versa to Steve or anyone on this platform. So to me, where I'm from, I just feel as though it's of irrelevance. What am I doing to contribute to society? I think that's my focus.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
100%. And I wish we would hear that message from our leaders.
Yeah, definitely need to hear that more from our leaders. And Yanissa, just out of curiosity, and I think Steve may have a closeout and everything, but I know Sasha is a master chess player, as is definitely the one of the folks that is the founders of the network. So just out of curiosity, Anissa and Elizabeth, are y'all chess players as well? Because I know that Sasha's probably wondering, because he's all about chess and about how the importance of chess is to learning critical thinking and leadership and things of that space. So are you a chess player, Anissa? And if so, we might have to have you challenge Sasha, but he is a champion. I don't know if you want to do that or anything.
I am a chess player, Mark. I love chess. I play chess with my computer because I spend a lot of time whether in the office or in my car. So I have a little chess game in the car. And when I'm at home, because the last time we spoke was about 3 a.m. my time. So while I was engaging with you guys on Clubhouse, I was playing chess just to keep me awake and keep me going. So yes, I love chess.
Sasha,
Good
be
to
glad
know.
to know that.
Good to know.
What about you, Elizabeth?
I am not a chess player, but I am a game designer.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
What kind of games do you design?
I design games that are socially conscious games. For example, one of the pieces of work I did maybe 20 years ago, which was the beginning of my work, was to design a game about diversity and inclusion that was a board game patterned after Monopoly. And now the game I'm designing, I'm working with a fellow out of Chicago. And instead of it being Dungeons and Dragons, we are putting a positive spin where people get rewarded for doing positive things. So we're trying to get the dopamine circuits closing and the feel-good chemicals going in the brain. Because getting things to flow, getting the feel-good chemicals flowing in the brain from actions that are civil or that are benevolent or that are kind, strengthening the pro-social responses is really critical as we help people move beyond the impact of what's happened to them.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, you two have been amazing guests. I don't know what
Thank you so much,
Chris
Phil.
and definitely Lee think, and definitely Steve think, but I know a lot of times when we have insightful guests, I'm always one that hope that they will come back and all in that space. You just heard Chris give you an invitation for
I'd love
Lead with
to.
Love, and I think that invitation probably also goes to Eunice as well. I don't want to speak words into your mouth, Chris, but I think that based on what I'm hearing, that you would probably love to have him on Lead with Love also. And if y'all ever want to come back on the new show, because we love getting amazing guests and all in that space, we would definitely love to have you back on in this space and definitely have you share your journeys and all along that kind of line. So do know you have a welcome home here on Mondays through Fridays from 10 to 11 and all in that space. Do you agree, Steve?
Yeah, that's it. No closeout today. Tomorrow, as we said, we didn't get to talk about it all today, but do want to talk about President Biden's address to the nation, where he said that democracy under attack a week after Paul Pelosi was struck with a hammer and is still in getting better, but it's going to be a long road to recovery for Mr. Pelosi. And what does this mean after next week's elections? Are we going to see violence? Are we going to see turmoil? And right now, it is looking as if the Republicans are predicted to sweep the midterm elections, including even in North Carolina, where right now it's projected that Ted Budd will most likely be our next U.S. Senator. Herschel Walker has picked up a lead in Georgia. And if that happens and we lose those two seats, it looks like the Republicans will take over control of the Senate, and they could possibly take over control of the House. And they're even saying that in North Carolina, there's possibility of them taking over the Supreme Court and returning a supermajority, which would then make it easier for them to do pretty much what they want to do. So a lot of Democrats on the edge right now. But right now, for our betting man, unfortunately, my prediction is that it's going to be a very bad night for Democrats, almost as bad as 1994, or maybe worse. Hopefully we're wrong. I think it would be bad to have a gridlock government, but we will talk about that tomorrow with only a few days left to the midterms. And what will this mean for Joe Biden's, if he does win that bad, will he run for president again? If not, who will be his successor? And will Donald Trump seek his party's nomination? And from what I'm hearing, he will. And the recent decision on Twitter is certainly going to help his cause. On that cut, we'll be back on tomorrow for our discussion of a lot of these issues. And from our hearts, let the light and love of our hearts always lift us out of darkness from our pod and Roku TV family. Thank you
Y'all
all.
have a blessed day.
Appreciate you. Yeah.